Thank you so much for being here. My name is Li-Ming Stroh. I'm the owner, founder and CEO of Master the World, and so happy to have Jimmy Smith back with us here. Jimmy, you want to say hello to everyone?
Good evening. Thank you so much, Limang, again. And first of all, thank you for picking a younger picture of me there. That's always very pleasing. So, yeah, and slightly receding hairline these days and grayer hair. But yeah, great to be back. Thank you so much. And great to see people from all over the States as well. As you know, it's my home away from home, being married to a Connecticutian from New England. So, salt of the earth. So I have a bit of a geology background. I'm, fascinated with wine. That's why I'm here. We decided to sort of do the theme on salt and the earth to give you a little bit of a sort of an underlying theme that these wines sort of are built around. So why I'm calling it this, that there's a lot of wines out there which we might talk about concepts which can be controversial, right? Minerality, for example, but related to that. So minerality, saltiness, brininess, whatever you want to say, whetstones on the systematic approach, flintiness. And what I want you to think about here is when we talk about this, we often think that these compounds will come directly from things to do with the ocean. So maybe if we're looking at vineyards, which are Pacific or Atlantic, and they're going to have a saltiness due to that location. I mean, one of the most famous might be sort of Constantia in South Africa. That there's a lot of sort of salty Sauvignon Blancs there because of the false bay effect that it gets. There's also Rias Baixas, Albarrinhos, that are said to have that kind of character as well. So we could have a characteristic that comes from oceanic effect, but in fact, it's more likely that the character comes from the geology, not directly. Right. And as a geologist, I'm very, very, very clear about this. So if we have flint soils, we're not getting flinty wines. It's not an aromatic. It's not an odor that is coming from the soil to the wine, but it's due to the compounds of those soils. So you might have more alkaline soils, which ends up producing more acidic wines, for example, and things like limestone and chalk and sandstones. So there's a lot to talk about when we talk about soils that have different types of pH levels, different mineral compositions, and how that can shape the acidity in the wine to give us the sense of saltiness or sapidity, we might say, or minerality or freshness or whatever. So I want you to think about that, because all these wines this evening have this theme in them, and it may be from the two things I just mentioned. So it may be oceanic or it might be geologically focused, but they all have them. And I want you to also think then about how we are looking at human impact on those as well. Can we detect those characteristics, or has there been more of a human impact or climate and weather impact that has actually kind of overridden those? So it's something to talk about. I'll kind of, it's the theme throughout the wines, but there are other themes that Limang and I have talked about as well. So the first wine. Now, one thing I'm going to pick out as a main theme is the question of what we call intensity in wine. And a lot of students that I've taught over the years, and can you believe it, I've been teaching for nearly 20 years. And this is where somebody in the chat panel will go, 20 years? Can't believe that. You don't look over 30. Please do say that if you can. Nobody. So Marshall mentioned actually in the questions, sapidity. So basically we're talking around its kind of mineral, salty, briny character. That's what we mean by this comment. That's what I'll go through as a kind of commonality throughout all the wines. So in these first three wines, we're going to discuss something around intensity, and I want to give you a different train of thought. Limang and I have been talking about this for some time now. You have really great tastings with master sommeliers, you have really great tastings with other key speakers, and you go through different methodology. I want to give you another one, which is what I teach to all my WSET level 3 and level 4 students, but it's not necessarily in the syllabus, but I want them to think about it to help them with their ability of identifying what we call intensity. Okay. So when you go through these first three white wines, And if you have got them all lined up, please do smell away for all of them. I'm just going to focus on wine 1 for now. Students of mine often they find it difficult to identify intensity just as an absolute umbrella term, right? Intensity could mean a number of different things, right? So how do you identify intensity? So one thing I tell my students is to think about 2 concepts, okay? There is the aromatic and there is the density. So let me go through those 2. Aromatic is what you would generally be taught in a class by saying what comes out at you at the nose. So when you're swirling it around, of course, you're sticking your nose in. And some people say, how far do you have to get your nose in? That will be lighter. And if you're further away, it's going to be more pronounced and so on. Okay, fine. That's what we call the aromatic. But there is another thing to think about, which can add to the overall intensity. And that is something I call density. Okay. So that is like the sort of richness or the concentration that you will find in the wine. So not the aromatic, but the real sort of maybe sweet concentration, oak concentration, body or whatever. But it's what we will call density because we can't detect sweetness at that point. Can't detect tannin and acid at that point on the smell. But it's what we call density. And I've picked 3 wines here that hopefully you're going to be able to identify something which has low aromatic and has low density, something that has maybe high aromatic but low density, and then something that has high density and maybe we'll talk about the aromatic behind it, maybe it's low or high. And those things combined will then help you talk about intensity more, okay? And on this first wine, I think this is quite a cool one to talk about on those sort of early steps I was mentioning. So if you're sticking your nose into this, and please do shout out at any time in the webinar chat.
Sorry, Jimmy, do you want me to go to the tasting note portion as you were talking?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. So here's my quick tasting note. So on the left-hand side is the actual structure of the SAT. So appearance, nose, palate, conclusion. On the right-hand side is both the aroma and the flavor, which are both identical on a WSET tasting note. I won't go into the politics behind that right now. We don't have enough time. But if you find it on the nose, it's on the palate and vice versa in the WSET. It's simplifying things. So you'll notice here that there's the whole of the left-hand side is filled out as per SAT. So the appearance, the nose, the palate, and the conclusion. Okay. And then there's a few things only that's identified on the right-hand side. So that's the appearance is the appearance, right? It's pale and it's lemon. I'm not going to spend too much time on that today. You've done plenty of other courses and tastings with Lemeng, and maybe you'll do like color focused ones. But we're looking here at the nose, right? I've identified that this is maybe light or medium minus, right? It's something that you have to stick your nose in. So for me, let's go to those 2 things I mentioned here. Aromatic, which is very, very, very light, and then density, which is actually quite light, right? You don't find richness and sweetness. It's not really thinking about rich compounds, which may be oak-based, mallow-based, lees-based, fruit-based. For me, that doesn't have this. So the combination of those is definitely pointing us towards light. And I think I would personally put down light on this wine style. I've put down medium minus as well because I'm just a lovely guy. And as an examiner, I am giving the more marks away there. I'm allowed to do it, right? I'm a special person, so I can do these things. So there's a little bit of I've given a little bit of a range on that. But notice on the nose, it's kind of gentle citric and green fruit. I found a little bit of herbaceous, a little bit herbal, but it has that underlying theme of minerality, right? You find something a little bit stony in there. Maybe you might say something towards briny a little bit, or oyster shell or something like that. And it's actually quite strong because there's not much else going on. Maybe there's a bit of white blossom here. I was sort of umming and ahhing behind something sort of towards jasmine or something like apple blossom that came through, little hints of it, but not much. Okay. So for me, that's the intensity, and I'm going to keep going through this as we go through each of the wines. It's a very youthful wine. Give it a taste, enjoy it. So I was in South Africa up to Sunday, Monday, and I've drunk for 2 weeks too much wine. So this is the first bit of wine I've had pretty much in 3 days now, 4 days. So it's tasting great. So bone dry, tons of acid, and that acid is coming through with that minerality. It's a real core theme in this wine, right? It's driving that kind of nature of this wine. Alcohol, it's medium. Don't worry about it so much. Light in body, not much density. Quite light in flavor intensity, medium minus, but not much of a finish. It's a fairly simple style wine. I really wanted to show you a simple style of wine, and WSET will class this as simple, just so we can clearly show you the underlying theme, and then something which is then light in density and intensity. Okay, very clear, very easy. I think this is an okay wine, very fresh, very sort of minerally in style, but I wouldn't feel that this would be age worthy. Why not? Not enough density behind it, and you need that texture. So you've got grape varieties up there. Now you have 3 options, and maybe other might be one as well. Is anybody like to hazard a guess to what might be in your glass? Grüne Veltliners can have that minerality, but might tend to have something that could be aromatic, Cortese, which is a grape from Piemonte, something which is inherent of areas like Gavi, for example. Also southern Piemonte, that kind of area. Sauvignon Blanc with its aromatic, or do you think it's something else in here? And where would you think it's from, therefore? So
I'm going to close the poll now. It's a 67% participation. I expect better work on the next round. All right. So Jimmy, here's what you've got. You've got 63% on Cortez, and you've got 19% on other. So it'd be good to hear where people are on other. 11% on Sauvignon Blanc and 7% on Gruner. And then in terms of region, it kind of mirrors that. Italy has 67%. And if you add up Italy and France, we're about 75% of folks here are thinking that it is Old World or Europe. So thoughts,
cool.
Jimmy, before we reveal?
Yeah, for sure. Love the comments, guys. Thank you so much for your interaction. That makes these really wonderful moments. Really great points there from Amanda, Daniel, Thomas as well. I know what Thomas is going for with his cryptic point, but for a reason. I love what Bob says. Bob mentions, thank you, Bob, for your comment. You're saying that no pyrazines. So you're linking that to Sauvignon Blanc being very high in thiols and pyrazines. And you're right. In this wine, there isn't the asparagus, there isn't the green pepper. You're exactly right. Almond finish for Gruner can have that, certainly at the more premium end. Gruner Veltliner Austrian has high rotundone. Rotundone is the chemical compound from pepper. So typical Gruner Veltliner has white pepper character to it. Didn't find that here. Maybe there was a little bit of herbal in this wine, but not that white pepper. So spot on for that, Bob, with your deduction. And what else here? So a lot of people going for that Cortese, of course. Riesling or Chenin could be a simpler style of one of those. Riesling typically with more aromatic, I would presume. But most of you here certainly sort of pitching towards it. And low on terpenes. Yeah, you're exactly right. So yeah, this one is from an area that I do go every year. So this is from that southern part of Piemonte, and it is Gavi. And the producer that we'll talk about in a second, but we're going all the way across to Italy now. Gavi is the very much part of Piemonte that has 1 foot in Liguria, which is on the Mediterranean. So it's a very Genoese focused area, which is built upon both red soils and white soils. So red clays, which you tend to get really quite robust Gavi from, and then white clays, calcareous soils, where you get generally the simpler and brighter minerally soils. So this is an interesting one because this area is famous for having some oceanic effect, but it's the Mediterranean. So it's not like an Atlantic or Pacific, but you'll see it on that map down there. It's actually right in that bottom right-hand corner, the purple area right over there on the right hand map, and it borders that Liguria. But the minerality in this, which is actually fairly prominent, is because of the limestone soils here. And this is Gavi from the commune of Gavi, so Gavi de Comune de Gavi, which used to be Gavi de Gavi, but they now call it Gavi de Comune de Gavi, which means it comes from around Gavi town, because there are, I think it was 9 villages which can be a part of Gavi. So, but this is from Gavi itself, which is very heavy in limestone and calcareous based limestone. So this means that you get that very key focus here on that minerality. It is the 23, I think that is right, yes. And this, in terms of its manufacture from La Toledo, is stainless steel with no lees, right? So this, it maybe sit on some gross lees for a bit, but there is no stirring here. This is making a very Cortese style wine. The grape is Cortese, right? Which gives you that very delicate characteristic. Now, please bear in mind that Gavi de Comune de Gavi and other Gavis could have lees, and that's typically the way they build body, or from red soils, they get this kind of savory, even nutty character to the wines. But this is really for a focused style. I wanted to give you a really sort of linear, fresh style with low density and low aromatic or light aromatic. And I think you have a picture of the family or maybe the location.
For sure. I'm curious to see if this is anyone's first time having a Gavi. You know, for us at MTW, it's the first time we've put one into the kit, because the Cortesia was not one of the selections that we had in our own grid. So we actually had our developers at that in. So you know, part of it is that we have a lot of testable SKUs, but this is definitely talked about in WSET's level 3. But I wondered if it's a discovery wine for some folks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, Limang, and I'm sure people will throw it out there. I just want to mention something that Thomas, all the way from Connecticut, rock and roll, Thomas, he mentioned that that if he thinks it is what it is, then a clam linguine goes great, and it really does. This, you know, if you add in things like herbs into the dish, if you've got things like samphire, this is such a good dish with seafood pasta. And classically here, you would have this, you'd have risotto. It's very, very famous in this area. And with Milanese risotto from Milan, you typically have a bit of saffron in there with a bit of seafood, and it's very, very good with that. So I think this is quite a linear style. It is very delicate. I would like to see it with oysters. I really would like to see it with oysters, but I'm an oyster fanatic, and I think that would work quite nicely. So this is Massimo Marrasso, which is the winemaker, and it's the Martini family that own the estate. It's actually a Genoese estate. That's very famous. A lot of people made their money with the Genoese Maritime Republic, and that filtered into this area. So there's lots of Genoese type buildings. If you've ever been down to Genoa, and even down the Cinque Terre, the beautiful park area down past Genoa, you'll see a lot of buildings there in a lot of the villages by the Mediterranean, which are pastel colored, you know, pastel pinks and blues and yellows and greens. Then this is actually something you see in Gavi and the Gavi villages, because of a lot of that Genoese influence in this location. So even if you are, say, starting in Liguria and then you drive up to Piemonte, you can't shake Liguria, and you never want to shake Liguria. It's quite wonderful. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but the flag of Genoa is the red cross, which is on a white background, which Britain took, England took as their flag, which is something of a bit of a political statement at the minute. People are putting all their English flags out for immigration and blah, blah, blah. But just an interesting tidbit fact there for you. Okay. Let's have a look at number 2. Please pour out number 2 into your glass. And I want to bring your attention. I know there's a slide there that said a few things. These are just pointers to help you think about concepts, but I'm going to come down to the concept I mentioned again here, because I picked this wine for a reason. I am a madman, but there is a method to my madness. So you have got a wine which has a completely different feel to it when you get to the nose, right? when it's pale lemon, by the way, and such. But when you come to the actual nose for its intensity, remember those two things I mentioned about aromatic and density? This has one of them in quite epic amounts, and then it has less so of the second one. And this will all come, if you're not too sure about that, as we have the third wine, you'll see what I mean. But when you stick your nose in this, it absolutely jumps out the glass with volatile compounds, with aromatics, which are going to be your flowers and your fruits and all those kind of compounds. It doesn't actually have much density, this wine. There's a little bit of core sweetness there, but actually it's much more about its aromatics. Now, I am going to, though, put this down as quite a pronounced nose, just because the aromatics are fairly off the scale. And I know you have tried things in previous kits, such as, it might be Torrontes, it might be Gewürztraminer, it might be Muscats, that are all probably just a step beyond this. But really, this has significant amounts of aromatic, which are fantastically gorgeous on this nose. Very youthful in style. So I would say this is towards the lower end of density, but very pronounced aromatics. Hence why I've given a range here about medium plus or pronounced. And the aromatics here are lovely. As I mentioned, we put floral at the top of the SAT list on the right-hand side, right? So it says floral because floral are the most volatile compounds that you will find in wine, that are the esters that come out through fermentation. So you've got things like honeysuckle, maybe a bit of chamomile there, but then a lot of blossom. I mean, I think there's some hundreds of types of jasmine, but something along those lines. Beautiful. There's even a little bit of rose in there, which is quite gorgeous. So really lots of floral. There's a bit of red apple, peach and apricot, melon and passion fruit. I love that. When you cut into a passion fruit, that aromatic that comes out. I find a little bit of sage or basil here, but underlying theme of minerality in this again, right? There's this like sort of a salty spray sort of character with it, a little bit of the hint of brininess come through. And that's here, right? That's in this wine again. But you'll notice, Thomas has mentioned pear. Yeah, I think so. There's kind of this sort of yellow or Williams pear sort of character to it, for sure. The secondary characteristics are here, which you didn't have previously. There is no wood in this wine, but there is something around lees here, which is built into a little bit of texture and a little bit of aromatic, that kind of creamy, maybe it's slightly touch of bread dough. But these are hints of, by the way. I mean, we're going to go up the scale as we go to the next wine. I'm all trying to show you a progression in these wines, for example. Give it a good taste. I mean, it's one of these wines where it's like grabbing your attention and you just have to get it down you, right? Because it's really fascinating. Give it a go.
I love this nose. This is a beautiful nose. Beautiful palate.
And it's very charming on the palate. So it is dry. Notice it's exceptionally high acidity driven by some mineral compound. There's this lovely sort of saltiness in there. But notice how there's more texture in this. Mm-hmm. There's more roundness on the palate. And that's why I've put medium body on that left-hand side. If I was pushed into a corner and said, would you go medium plus? Would you go medium minus? I would still go sort of medium minus. I think it's that saltiness and freshness, which is, kind of softening that, making it brighter. But the medium body is for sure. But what I love about wine, right? There's many things. But one of the things is when you have a body, then you have aromatic or flavor intensity, which is greater. That means you've got a delicacy or elegant. You can use a lot of those classic English words. It's not just big, intense, full-on, full-bodied with big intensity. This has got a gentle body, but beautiful flavor intensity that comes off the back of that. And I think it's got really great finish, which is kind of brought into your mouth for longer with minerality, with kind of that sort of salty character. Which is great. So I know there were comments, but my thing doesn't automatically scroll down. Let's have a look.
So Jimmy, there's a question here whether you're getting some thiols, and instead of just answering yes or no, maybe you can help the rest of us who are scratching our heads going, what is that?
Yeah, for sure. So you've got groups of chemical compounds, which are metapkins, you've got thiols, and you've got pyrazines, all in a very similar group. These compounds can go off in lots of different directions, but generally speaking, we're looking at herbaceous compounds, how they're reflected into wines. So things like a sort of grass and all those kind of boxwood is a very classic sort of thiol. All those kind of compounds. So it's in the herbaceous on this, and of course that's more diploma conversation and even master of sommelier wine conversation. But it's really good note to make. There's a little bit here. I think you might be right, and I think I put it down as sort of sage. You'll see it on the right hand side. There's something slightly minor there, and you're right, Gillian, for sure. Amanda said, "Can you do a quick blick?" A quick blick. I like that. Let's do a quick blick for each wine so we can understand quality level conclusion. So blick is balance level, balance, length, intensity, complexity. So they're the four things that get you to your quality level on the bottom left-hand side. Balance, first of all, most wines today should be balanced. If they're not, then it's a bit of a problem, I think. But you could have out of balance with alcohol or oak or whatever it may be. I think this has balance. It just doesn't have length. I need it to be long for length. I'm just being slightly critical, but it has intensity. And I think this has some complexity there. It's delivering floral, green fruit, stone fruit, tropical fruit, herbal, other, yeast, and mallow, which is quite a lot. So I would say that this is very good because it hits 3 out of the 4 blicks, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you, Lemang, for writing that down. Oh, good. Jerry says he really appreciates the I would like to circle it, Jerry, but I can't figure out so I've got squares, if that's okay, or rectangles. But thank you very much for that. I think it helps, isn't it? It's kind of clear, very, very clear in its approach. Should we do some guessing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just multitasking here, making sure. All right. Okay.
Yeah, so I enjoy that. So remember, underlying theme that we're talking about, salt of the earth. And I'm going to go through that very shortly in this wine. So what do you think this is?
So we have the 4 options here. Oh.
Yep, the poll is up.
Yep, poll is up. You got your 4 options. Once again, it is anonymous. So please take a moment to fill it out, and let's see if we could do better than the 67% that we got last time. And while people are answering the poll, I just wanted to reiterate, for those of you who are not testing at all, it doesn't mean that all this stuff is irrelevant. For me, going through and trying to understand, is this a good quality wine? Having the blick really helps to say, yeah, I paid a good amount of money for it and I'm getting my money's worth, or I'm not. So if something is balanced, hopefully it is, has the length, has the intensity, and it's complex, and you paid $30 for it, you're going, hey, I did pretty well. So yeah, exactly. I think that, even if you're not studying, it can be very relevant for you to think about things through the blick process. When I'm asked by friends and family, is this good wine? Did we get a good bottle here at the restaurant table? And that's kind of subconsciously what's going through my head. Is it balanced? Does it have length, or did it just go away?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I need to just, whilst you're all voting, the balance I mentioned, it's about kind of balance in your mouth, but there could be things out that the best way to think of it is things that are out of balance. Is there anything that annoys you about that wine? Then that's something you might need to think about. Length, it needs to be long, and long is it persistent in your mouth. You need to figure out how long it is in your mouth. Everybody's different. Intensity, it's not as simple as saying, oh, it's pronounced, it gets a mark. Actually, it's about in reference to the body. So if the intensity is bigger than the body, you give it a mark. So even if you're looking at a light wine, but the intensity is medium, for that light wine, that's good intensity. So you would give it a mark. So just bear that in mind. And complexity is if it's got lots of course, things going on like this wine. But yeah, lots of great comments there.
So let me share the results.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so we're at 55% Albarino / Alvarinho, and we have 16 or Torrontés, 29%. So I think people really took that aromatics to heart here and went for the high aromatic grapes. So I
Mm,
think it'll be helpful, Jimmy, to explain the difference between what you're looking for those two
sure.
wines. And then Gruner has a good 16%, and nobody else thought of anything other than these. And as we are anticipating, because of what we're seeing with Albarino and Torrontés, 58% are on Spain, 23% on Argentina, and 16% on Austria. So what do you say?
Um, first of all, Leming, I just love how you put this together. It's such a great way of doing it. Great voting. I just want to say that it's really great, and I love the comments coming in. So thank you, everybody. Great percentages there. So Gruner-Veltliner, as I mentioned, do you know what? It could be. It really could be, because you've got something a little bit like mentioned there, a little bit of thiol, a little bit of something, a little bit sagey or something there, which could be maybe rocket, for example, that little bit of pepperiness you get from that. So potentially Gruner Veltliner is a really good choice. Albarino or Alvarinho, that's a great variety, right? The Gruner thing, by the way, typically you'd have less texture, but there are some that can be really big. Albarino can have lees and texture to it, really good aromatic and minerality. And minerality is a big one there. It certainly has it above Gruner. Gruner tends to have less minerality. Torrontés is really a variety of aromatic, okay, not density. So it's high altitude is the best from it from Argentina, where you're going to get a lot of floral compounds, which certainly are in that kind of Turkish delight sort of style, you know, that real sort of aromatic rosy characteristic. So good options there. Let's have a look at this one then. So well done on those. This is one that gets minerality from two forms. Okay, this gets minerality from being battered by the Atlantic in the Spanish Northwest. So it is Galicia. It's a place that I hold dear to my heart. I visit very frequently. And this is in actually the southern part of Galicia, right on the Portuguese border. This is in O Rosal, which is a sub-region right in that, nestled in that southern section. So it's not actual typical Albarino heartland, but it makes really some of the saltiest expressions of you can get. So really battered by the Atlantic on granitic and slate soils, which is something which also promotes high acidities. Certainly weathered granite does. So that's where you get this acid and this mineral. I mean, that's really salty wine, that one. But what they do really well here is 6 months lees, which gives it texture. Very classic with Albarino. There are kind of 3 Albarino styles out there, by the way, from Galicia. Firstly, one that is 0 lees and just very sort of fruity floral. That's kind of most commercial stuff. Then lees, creamier style like this one, which has aromatic. And then those that have gone through maybe some oxidation or wood, which is minor. We're in that middle ground, which I think is such a good ground to be in. And you've got to really hold your hat up to such a sexy style of wine. I mean, it's aromatic, it's got texture, it's going to age. By the way, Albarinos age like Riesling, like Semillon. Honestly, the best thing you can do is pick something like this wine up, or go and get someone, you know, maybe a Fefenanas or something like that, or a Pato Senaran or something. Pick it up, buy 6 bottles, right? And then try and keep your hands off them. You know, drink one immediately, but then have one next year, and then have one next year and next year, and just make some quick notes about it and go, Jesus, this is great how that is developing. And I've had epiphanies with it. You spend like 10, 15 pounds, you know, 20, 25 bucks or something on an Albarino. It's not much, and it ages brilliantly. Honestly, a little smidgen of information, do it, and you'll be very happy.
Dylan's got a great question here, Jimmy. What do you
Yeah.
think is the calling card aromatic for Albarino?
It's a good one. I don't think it's a specific. I certainly find Albarino is floral. It's a very strong one, but it has an abundance of fruit. It has the brilliant ability to tick green fruit, citric fruit, stone fruit, and tropical fruit, the 4 major groups. So that's very, very strong. And then salt, something to do with minerality. So I don't think it's a necessary one of those. I think it's a combination which makes them really quite beautiful. as wines. And do you know what? When I'm in a gastropub or something like that in the UK, or even in the States, you know, if there's a liquor store and I'm on a holiday somewhere outside of Connecticut and I don't know the place, my go-to would be something like an Albarino if I'm not sure about the selection on offer. Great wines. Really great. This is the vineyards. So what you'll notice on the picture is that you've got a little bit of so you can't see it quite here, but that's a bit of the mountain ranges of Portugal in the background. You have the Minho River, which separates Spain and Portugal, and you'll notice these are the lush green vineyards that you find here. It rains heavily in Galicia, more than the UK. Crazily, I know some of you are from like the Pacific Northwest or the Willamette Valley. Much more than the Willamette. The Willamette's like 1,000. Here it's 1,500. So it's very, very, very wet. But look at that. You can just see them here. They're pergola or parral in Spanish. They're highly trained because that's enabling all that brilliant airflow to reduce disease pressure. So yeah, they go through a lot of lengths to get a glass here. That's Olga Verde as well as the winemaker. She's fantastic. Really, really great. Cool. Well, I'm just feeling it now. Are you guys feeling it? I'm feeling it. So wine number 3 in your glass, please. And you'll notice immediately something in terms of the appearance is a little bit different here. Remember, we've got these 2 conversational pieces happening about these first 3 wines, right? The underlying theme of minerality, and then talking about the intensity of the wine. We're looking at this and it's giving us a clue though. So appearance, we can often forget about, but it can give you something which is a clue. And here you're looking at something. I couldn't decide if this was pale gold or medium lemon. And I was last night I was somewhere. What did I put down? I put medium lemon in the end. I don't know. Does it? Pale gold for me has to be like flat champagne, right? So I think it might be pale gold. You know, I was sorry. Limang knows
Good to know
this.
that even examiners have a hard time with it.
Well, I'm colorblind. No, I'm joking. I was doing my notes late last night after I just put the kids to bed, Limang, if you remember. So I didn't take the appearance so seriously here, but this is a great thing. Take it seriously. I think this is more sort of pale gold, which is showing you that there's oxidation or there is some form of maturation or both of those. Okay, so I think that's the case, a case on this wine. Now, this is the exciting thing because we're going to talk about those underlying themes. Sticking your nose in, notice how this doesn't have a huge aromatic, right? But it has a ton of density, okay? And with that density comes the intensity. God, that sounds like a great lyric, doesn't it? If anybody has a great name for a band that I should be, like a wine band or something, please put it in the chat panel. nothing crass or crude, please. But yeah, here you've got not the aromatic, but density. It's concentrated. It's sweet, even. It's rich. It doesn't have a huge amount of lift. Of course, there's lift coming from some of that density, but it's not as aromatic as the last. I purposely picked that Albarino before this to give you that difference in aromatic, but there is density here, richness. I also find it having some tertiary notes here, so that's why I've put developing on the nose. You see on the left-hand side of your screen. Now, it's sweet smells here, sweet florals, sweet fruit, okay, sweet oak. These are all the characters coming through. It smells sweet on the nose. Now, we're probably going to taste it and go, it's not sweet, but it has that sweet acacia, that honeysuckle, that honey, that kind of acacia honey that you can get and squirt over your cereal or your oats or whatever it may be. You've got ripe pear, peach, mandarin, apricot, banana, pineapple. There's tropical elements that come out here. So it's much more concentrated with those. And then there's, of course, oak, evident oak here in that vanilla area, that coconut, that butterscotch that's listed on yours. I felt a little bit of nuttiness here, almond nuttiness, and I put that down as tertiary. These are compounds that give us that, and honey as well. Now, you'll notice I've listed 5 things in that bottom of the screen, the tertiary thing. If you get one of those at least, and you're confident about it, then on the nose, the development will be developing. Okay, that's why I've put that down here. give it a good taste. Sorry, I'm being rushed because I can talk a lot. So dry, but notice it has some acidity. Now, if you think about what I've just taught you about the nose, remember I said there's those two underlying themes, but I only talked about the intensity. I never talked about salt of the earth to you, right? And that's because I think the human element here has convinced me that I'm not finding it. So on the nose, I couldn't find any minerality, but actually on the taste, there is decent acidity, right? But the alcohol probably detracts from it. The body detracts from it. But there is some minerality. There is some acidity there. Is it enough to say minerality? I'm not sure, but it's in the back of my mind. So I'm thinking there's something a little bit salty in there. There's a bit of minerality, but there's so many other things going on. So, if I'm in a guessing game, which we all are, I'm like, where is this going to be from? Maybe there is some sort of geology, or there is some sort of oceanic influence on this wine. I don't think it's long on the finish. I just don't. But I think it's pretty decent wine, but full on and rich style. You've got your guesses there. So do you think it has a Chardonnay element to it? Has it got that kind of honey lift that Riesling could have? Is it aromatic such as Torrontés? Or do you think there's something else at play here? Is it that honeysuckle and, that sort of real floral element you can get from things like Chenin, for example? I don't know.
And Jimmy, just as people are answering the poll, you did give this one a good rating as opposed to very good or outstanding. So what if the Blick did it not meet? What if balance, length, intensity, and complexity did not meet for you?
Yeah, for me, I had two problems about this wine. And they're not massive problems. I'd still be happy. I wouldn't kick this wine out of bed. But they're what I'm sort of diminishing it a little bit. Let me start with the positives. It has complexity and it has intensity. I'm happy with those two. So that's what bumps it up to good. I don't think it's the longest in the mouth. I think it doesn't have like a long sort of core to it. It's quite full and it kind of drops away. And then I feel at this moment in time that it's a little bit overtly butterscotchy, kind of vanilla-y. That oak is quite prominent, which along with the alcohol, which I also find quite high, is just pushing this just out of balance for me. I think with time that's going to correct, but that's why I put it down as good.
Fair enough. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 3 seconds, guys. Get your last votes in. And I think Jeff just mirrored your comment, Jimmy, about that oak as well, getting it hard. Funny enough, as we're closing the poll now, we had a different kit for a different program where this particular educator called me after she did her class and said, there was no oak in the Chardonnay that you sent me. And I think that as we were, and I kind of am revealing things here, but I think that it was interesting that oak is actually not that easy to find in a lot of wines anymore, as people are being very careful with it. So I actually think from an education standpoint, even if we are going to give this a good, it's really good to test ourselves with that oak and having that continuum tested, if you will.
Yeah, and Jerry, I like Jerry's comment there. But yeah, I really wanted to show you commonality of those two themes, and I really hope in terms of trying to understand intensity, you got something which was very simple on both of those. You had something aromatically strong, and now you got something density strong, and how that can all impact intensity. For me, there were three. I wanted to pick quite an obvious style on that
so
front.
86% are on Chardonnay, so I didn't reveal much. The 11% who are on Riesling and the 4% on Torrontés, can you just help them out a little bit as we go on to the reveal?
Yeah, Torrontés won't have density. It's all about aromatic. So Riesling can have density. Typically that's provided by sugar, which this wine doesn't have, or very sort of aged Grand Cru sites, either in Alsace or Germany, for example, but other places too. So of course you're left with Chardonnay, and it is Chardonnay. Of course, it's clearly identifying that strong component of human nature to it. I wanted to pick something which is from your side of the pond, and is from it's Walt Wines. It's they're based in Sonoma Coast, but they're based in the Sonoma Valley area near Sonoma itself. But this wine actually comes from two sites. So they have one site in the Sonoma Valley, and then they have one which is the Bob's Vineyard, I think, which is over on the Sonoma Coast, the actual Sonoma Coast zone. I think that's right. Yes, there's one in Sonoma Coast, one in Sonoma Valley. So there is an essence here that you've got a bit of that Pacific effect, and I'm a massive flag flyer for the West Sonoma Coast, but the Sonoma Coast is actually quite a large area. It can be coastal, but it can actually be sort of Russian River, Chalk Hill, down into Sonoma. So for me, I want Sonoma Coast to be a little bit brighter because it should be, but it is variable. So I think if you want your Chardonnays lighter and brighter from this neck of the woods, make sure you look out for the newer appellation, AVA, which is West Sonoma Coast, from Fort Ross Seaview down to Occidental, Bodega Bay, that kind of area. That's where you're going to get the real sort of brightness from. This one, though, seems like it's much more around Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Mountain, more richer kind of characteristic.
And I also wanted to point out, if it's your first time working with our bottles, all the actual labels and information about it, you can take this sticker off and it actually has the alcohol. So for those of you who are feeling like, man, I'm getting a little heat on this, what is the actual alcohol? By law, we're putting in the actual alcohol and it's 14.6, which means that this producer can go up to 15.6 if they wanted to. I don't think it's 15.6, but it definitely is feeling more like a 14.6. And the underlying thing, even though Jimmy's not talking about necessarily everything you can learn from these wines, one of the benefits of cross tasting like this is that if you are having trouble with low versus high alcohol whites, there are other wines in this, the first three. The second wine was a 13% alcohol. So you can start to play with an understanding, looking at one dimension, if you will, at a time. Jerry's question, refresh my memory. I remember vanilla oak, MLC butter, Holy Trinity. Is it Lee stirring, maybe, Jerry?
Yeah. The three famous sort of additions, but how you coke Chardonnay out of its very sort of low aromatic shell is by lees, is by yeast, and so that's the same thing. By lees, by mallow, and then by oak. Yep.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because as a winemaker of Chardonnay, I feel like they don't need to do much on this, but they have. So let me have a look at this. So this is 15 months in 30% new French oak. They I don't know about the lees. They've definitely done lee stone. I'm not sure about mallow, but I would hope they haven't done mallow, so they protect the acidity in this wine, which I think the acidity is quite good. I know everyone's talking about there's quite a lot of alcohol behind this. It definitely needs food, but there is some good acidity behind that. But yeah, it's got a lot of character to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the mallow things Gillian mentioned, if you feel like there's a mallow, I would hope there isn't, but mallow we can often get quite easily confused with any kind of textural component to it. But it does seem that like there is some butteriness, but that could be coming from the oak. It could be coming from the lees. But I would hope they wouldn't, but you never know. Hey. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Are we good? Excellent, fantastic. So we have two reds that we're going to try next as a pair. So if you have two glasses, that would be very useful. We will go through them one by one. So if you don't have the two glasses, then it's okay. But it would be nice for you to have direct comparisons between these two. I can't remember, Limeng, if am I allowed to say what I'm about to say?
You want to say what the variety is? Is that what you're trying to go with?
No. Well, yeah, I think we agreed that we are going to say the variety, aren't we? But then we're going to talk about where they're from. What's your polls say? I can't remember.
The polls actually give the variety choices, but we can maybe taste first. let's taste
Well,
and then.
yeah, let's taste to do it. Yeah, that's cool. So they are going to be the same grape variety, these two wines, but you have got one which is I hate the terminology, but the nomenclature is old world versus new world. So you have that in play, but old world can be anywhere Europe, and new world can be anywhere outside of that. So you've got two of the same variety here. So we're in the red category, of course. You've got very nice transparency behind both of these. So focusing on wine number 4, because we have it up here, you'll notice that in your glass, whatever size glass you have gone for, it has transparency. So with transparency, we're going to say pale. And then for color, now I think this has just gone into that slight. I know there's different scales for different courses. What we say in WSET is ruby is red, okay, and then garnet is where it's slightly losing its consistency, so it's going a little bit bricky. Maybe, for instance, tawny is properly going brown, and you'll notice here that it's not just a brilliant red anymore; it's gone a little bit garnet, and that means we have some oxidation here. That's going to be purpose oxidation, deliberate, or it's going to be through bottle aging. Which you could also argue is deliberate. So that's your first thing to think about here. The next thing is the intensity, and we're going to talk about those concepts again, about density and about aromatic. Density in red wine is going to come from a hell of a lot of extraction, ripe fruit, for example. You know, typically you'll see that in the color as well, being much darker, like a Primitivo or a Zinfandel or a Malbec or a Cabernet or a Merlot, you know, that has that kind of density behind it. But there are a number of grape varieties that don't tend to have that, right? And it may be the likes of, I don't know, Nerello Mascalese, it might be Garnacha, it might be Sangiovese, it might be Pinot Noir, it might be a whole host of those. So that's one thing to sort of bear in mind immediately. Swirl it around. You'll notice this doesn't have much density, right? It's not concentrated. It has some good lift to it. There's some good aromatic, but it's not concentrated. That immediately would tell me that this could come from a cooler place, right? And when we get to the actual aromatics as well, it also seems like it might be from a cooler vintage, potentially. It's definitely developing because it has something tertiary behind this. But you'll notice here that it has red currants, cranberries, cherries. Maybe some of them are slightly dried. I didn't put that down on the tertiary on the bottom right, but I think there might be a case of saying, you know, kind of almost that kind of goji berry, that dried cherry, that dried strawberry character. Some of it maybe, but there is a herbaceous note in this. Something like tomato stalk, something like something a little bit grassy to it, or mint or menthol. But that inherent minerality is here as well. And this is something that people often forget about red wines, is talking about the concept of salinity and minerality in red wines. You get them, just not in such obvious amounts, because we're now competing with more extraction of the skins. We're competing with tannin. You know, these components are often what detracts from picking these things up. But I find something almost like graphite-y, maybe minerally, sort of pencil shaving character to it, that kind of note. I find the oak being quite classic. And what I mean by that, so it's a very annoying wine thing to say, but it's kind of that kind of like French or Hungarian oak, something which is cedar or green resinous sort of character, that pininess and a hint of smoke on this. But then I've got age. We know we're going to get tertiary here because we've already identified the color as changing into an older color, garnet. And that's where you've got this little bit of leather, but hint of like forest floor, wet leaves, the season that we are entering, leafer season, and that little bit of vegetal character behind it. And I find that here, it's quite mature, this this style on the nose. Give it a good taste, because we haven't done the palate yet. So notice this has a really great balance to it. If it's a little bit on the herbaceous or herbal side, but it has really great balance. So dry, notice how there's a lot of that salinity, sapidity, you could say, that sort of stoniness that comes through. And that is that acidic focus. It's very high in acidity, but very gentle in tannin. You wouldn't say that's got a lot of bitterness or grip in your gums like you would do with something, you know, like a Malbec or a, you know, a Cabernet or a Merlot or whatever. Medium alcohol, it's much more gentle than the Chardonnay that was the previous wine, but gentle on the body, gentle on the flavor intensity. Maybe I'm a bit mean on the flavor intensity there. Maybe I might go up one, but the finish is good, but not long enough for me. So medium or medium plus. So good wine. It's an interesting style that has this kind of, I would worry about aging this. I said this down. I have actually put on my notes. Let me read out exactly what I wrote here. I put, I think this is good, ready to drink, but scared of aging. And the reason I'm saying that is that it has good acid, it has some tannic structure, but it's already aging into this kind of slightly wet leaf sort of character, forest floor. And it's got a bit of green edges. I think the greener edges will only get stronger as it ages. And for me, that might be a little bit of a problem. So that's why I put drink now, not suitable.
And to answer Jerry's question, how would you describe these tannins?
Oh, cool. Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one. Tannins in a word or two. So they are, they're definitely in quantity. That's what I put down there, right? Low or medium minus. So that's the quantity. The style of the tannin, I would say, is quite fine, grainy, but a little bit green. And the two first ones, that like little fine, dusty, grainy tannin, which is absolutely fine. It's the green that worries me a little bit about aging. I just don't think it's going to work too well with it. It's a little hint of astringency. It's nothing bad, but yeah.
And Jimmy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go on to wine number 5 while the poll is up, so we can talk about wine number 5. So we're not going to reveal, this is the difference that we're doing here. We're not going to reveal wine number 4 just yet because giving it away would give you a little bit too much. So let's move on to wine number 5 and talk about it, and then we'll reveal both together.
Yeah. And this is fascinating. So wine number 5. So we've got very similar development of color here. So it's pale again. I mean, we would really split hairs here if we were to say that there's a little bit more intensity. There's potentially a little bit more intensity, but I'd still say it's pale. I think this is garnet again, but you could argue sort of ruby to garnet again. So I think it's very similar. I think this has good intensity though. Like now, I want to bring you back to the principles I talked about. This has salinity in it. Again, it's going to be something which is impacted by ocean or by geology. But it's just got aromatic, but it's got more density than the last one, right? There's a little bit more concentration. So if you go back to the first one, it's definitely things like sour cherries. It's very, very focused on that gentle red fruit. But here, there's potentially just a little bit a sweeter cherry. There's maybe a little bit of something like plum in there, a little bit of spiced plum, maybe a little bit of raspberry comes through. There's something just a little bit more on here. Hopefully I listed those things. I didn't even look at this taste. Yeah, there you go. So I think it's like morello cherry, red plum, raspberry that comes through here. It's definitely developing on the nose. But I've even put here that there's a little bit of kirsch, like concentrated cherry, like, you know, like kirsch liqueur or Chambord. There's just something, an extra step here. It's got a little bit of herbal note, but not herbaceous. And please, that's important. They're very close in their etymology, herbaceous and herbal, herbaceous and herbal. Very important that you differentiate between these, because herbaceous will give you an indication of a colder place or a colder climate, or picked early, or something like that, something which it's going to be greener and full of pyrazines and thiols. Whereas herbal is actually typically something which is given through terroir. So it's inherent of the grape or the location, you know, like you get, like on a Grenache, you get tons of things like garrigue, right? You get, like lavender and thyme and rosemary. So that's what we're talking about with herbal. And herbal's not an indicator of somewhere cold. It's an indicator of place or grape. So that's important. So here you'll notice that I've actually put down like mint, sage, basil in those components. So I don't think this is from necessarily cold vintage or cold place. I've got a lovely sort of stoniness in here again, but I like that the fact that the oak here is just a smidgen sweeter than the last wine, but in a very sexy way. So toast, cedar, hint of vanilla, but not the things like coconut and all that kind of stuff. And then it definitely has a bit of age, though I don't know if I've put that down, Limeng. What have I said
You
down
said
here?
has potential for aging. And Jeff just asked, what is the potential? How do you expect it to develop with aging?
Yeah, great question. So let me see. Sorry, my chat thing's gone. Let me. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. So the thing for me, and this is a beautiful little mini masterclass in these two wines, same grape variety as we know. The last one had that little bit of a rustic edge, which was green, which I'll be worried about aging. This wine doesn't. It also has a little bit more core to it, a little bit more concentration in its body. So I would see this aging really well into a savory phase. So it has that leather, forest floor, etc. This has got a little maybe the mushroom, but it should go to that mushroom to savory, maybe sort of soya sauce kind of area, that kind of character, umami, and it will go there very nicely and be backed up with the structure, and it won't go green. Whereas the last one I would worry about that sort of green character. This also, I haven't tried it actually, so let me give it a go. But you'll notice there's a bit more structural tannin on this.
Yes, we're not going to review which the variety is yet, but what is the common thread? You talked a lot about the differences. What is the common thread that you're seeing between these two wines that make it the same variety?
Yeah, it's a really good point to make. The common thread, I want to say, first of all, there is the commonality of this kind of sapidity and high acid minerality that comes through, which gives you, you can talk about salinity on both of these. Definitely a common thread in this. There's a huge common thread of red fruit, which is very important. One is slightly sweeter with its red fruit than the other, which is a little bit greener, slightly herbaceous. Hugely a hugely important point to it. It's been gently oaked. Both of them have been gently oaked. One a little bit more traditionally, the other maybe a little bit more because it can stand up to it. So that's something to think about. There are certain grape varieties that have a lot of oak. Some don't have so much oak. I know you've got some grape varieties up there already to look at. And really it's delicacy, I think, as well. Tannins. Certain grape varieties have huge tannins, whereas these have gentle tannins. Both of these wines are. The second one a little bit more. And I know there was a point earlier that they said higher tannin. I know that was Jeff, I think. Yes, earlier, and this is about sort of 7 minutes ago now, when we're talking about that first red wine. Remember, that was your first red after white, and your first red always seems a little bit more grippier because you haven't tannin up to that point. However, what you said is maybe minerality and acids, and I think both of these wines have acids to them. For sure.
All right, so I'm going to go back to the poll, and we have some things thrown out on the chat, which I promise Jerry and others will come back to. But in the very first question on wine number 4, we said Pinot Noir, Tempranillo, and Barbera. And there are enough percentages on Tempranillo and Barbera that, Jimmy, maybe it's worth at least revealing what variety and why it's not. And then we can address the other question of additional varieties.
Sure. So if we work upwards from the grape variety, so Barbera, first of all, Barbera is the grape variety, the most commonly grown red grape variety in Piemonte. They call it the people's grape variety, whereas Nebbiolo is the grape of kings, the king of grapes. Barbera is the people's grape. So you're going to find the general populace drinking more Barbera. And why? Why do they drink that? Well, Nebbiolo, the other grape, is so tannic and so acidic that it's really only for those who can afford it and drink it, age it and drink it many years down the line, historically. Barbera doesn't have that tannin. So Barbera is actually generally low in tannin and high in acid. So the combination that we've got on our wines is actually fairly similar. So that's a really good guess to go for. Barbera tends to be darker, generally darker in its appearance, might have a bit more color to it, and tends to have a little bit more wood sometimes as well, but it does depend on if it's Barbera from Asti or Barbera from Alba. So I'm not going to give you any definite on that one for sure. Tempranillo next, or Tempranillo blend, is fascinating because you will find that Tempranillo is not the darkest of grapes, so it can have good transparency. It's typically other grapes that add to it. Tempranillo is red fruited, as Barbera can be as well, which is key, but there's often a lot of supporting wood to it, and Tempranillo will have more tannin with its high acids. So that's something which the jury is out. But that comes to Pinot Noir, right? And Pinot is a fascinating one because Pinot is red fruited, is high in acids, has generally lower tannic structure behind it. So yeah, you're looking at something which has a bit more salinity as well. You don't tend to find too much salinity in, say, a Tempranillo, and then the other Barbera, the same again, not so much. Despite the fact that Barbera is not oceanic affected, but it is grown on limestone, you might find a tiny bit of minerality in it, but it's not that common. And Tempranillo is the same. So there is more minerality that comes through salt of the earth through Pinot Noir, for example, as well. So the grape varieties there, very, very interesting choices. What are we
I'm
doing?
gonna reveal.
Okay,
I'm gonna reveal.
you're not gonna reveal which is old or new though, right?
Not yet.
Okay. Have you got a different poll for that?
I have a poll for wine 5, and it actually, folks did already answer that one. Let me just show that again. Folks answered on wine 4
Okay,
that
yeah.
it is 46% Italy, kind of goes with the Barbera, and 21% France. But if you add it up, we're in Europe for 67%. So I think most people are landing in Europe. And do you want to go to the reveal? And I mean, folks, I'm sorry, Jimmy and I are kind of playing along here to figure out what's the best way to teach you and reveal in the right amount of time. What do you think, Jimmy?
I'd like to put a caveat in there. This is probably more my fault for mixing up how we do things. So, Limang, you're trying the best to deal with a diva like me.
All good, all good. All right, so we're in Old World / Europe for this one. I think what we can do is reveal which one this is, and then we can talk about why. So remembering that only 21% of you thought that it was from France, let's see where we go. And
Surely
feel
not.
free, guys, if you have questions and you're like, this was a head scratch, and I promise Jerry that we'll answer the Gamay question. Jimmy, maybe some help on Gamay versus Pinot on this particular one.
Yeah, good point to make. Now we are going to we're going to Burgundy here, as you can see, Domaine Jean-Charles Favreau. And of course, we're therefore talking about being Burgundian red, and you have two options, and you've of course got Pinot and Gamay. I think the beautiful thing we should just quickly mention, which I think a lot of you may, if you've done Wine with Jimmy, you really like my little anecdotes, and I think you really need to know this. And this would only take me about 2 minutes, Lemeng, if you will please indulge me. But the French have a really interesting psychological relationship with Pinot Noir and Gamay, and it's absolutely embedded in history. It's super important to understand this as well, because you'll get a fair inkling into what the French are like. So in the 14th century, you have the creation of the dukedom of Burgundy, and you have the 4 dukes of Burgundy. The first one, Philip the Bold, he fought in a battle of Poitiers when at the age of 16 against the English, of course, always against the English, and did very well. So he got the moniker the Bold, and he tried to outlaw Gamay right at the end of the 14th century. Now, this is an absolutely pivotal moment, because this is the start of about 400 years of trying to outlaw Gamay. Why? Well, because this was the feudal system, lots of people living on the nobles' lands, and the populace would drink Gamay, 4 times bigger yielding than Pinot Noir. And they would drink it, and they would think, the nobility were thinking that all the plebs drinking this Gamay were not working, they were getting drunk, and it was really affecting their productivity. So they tried to ban Gamay. This started in 1396, happened throughout all the Dukes of Burgundy. Napoleon carried it on as well later on in the 19th century. So you basically got several hundred years of the French nobility and aristocracy trying to outlaw Gamay. And you have this big dichotomy between the aristocracy drinking Pinot Noir because it's the grape of the rich, the prominent, the wealthy, the famous, the monarchy. And then you have Gamay, the grape of the people. And that is the way of things still today. Of course, there's more of a meeting point with producers, but that is really important. So you have these 2 grapes growing up side by side, one being high yielding, one being low yielding, one for the plebs, one for the nobility. As simple as that, trust me. It's really quite crazy. So today there's thankfully more of a crossover, but there are similarities. Pinot is a parent, Gamay is one of the offspring. Lots of similarities. How do you identify those differences? Gamay, without semi-carbonic maceration, I'm talking about here, because that's a completely different ball game. But you are talking about Gamay being generally red fruited with more spices. There's generally a little bit more of a lift of spice to it. Tannic structure, there's more color in Gamay, more purple as well. It tends to be a little bit deeper and more purple. And the acid's the same as Pinot Noir. The tannins tend to be the same as well. It's mainly that kind of color, spice, you would say. But if it is carbonic maceration, then of course you've got banana and bubblegum and all those kind of those things as well. But yeah, I would say they're the major differences between them. Gamay is also grown on granite, whereas Pinot is grown on salt of the earth limestone. So you tend to get a slightly sort of more salty mineral acid in Pinot, whereas Gamay tends to be more focused, sort of brighter acid.
Okay, so this is the wine that Jimmy had picked, and it does say old vine here, Jimmy. That's what that means, right? Yeah.
Vieille Vigne, is correct. So this is an estate that, or the family has been growing since 1860, but the estate has been making wine since 1920. They are a small family estate. 55-year-old vineyards go into this wine. So old vines, it depends on the place, but it's normally above sort of 25 or 30-year-old vines. Old vines mean better root systems, generally means it's better to get through the vintages, and you should get smaller concentrated fruit from it. 1 hectare for this one, because this is a Chassin Montrachet estate fruit there, and it's all kind of lutte raisonnée, so it's sustainable viticulture. The curveball in this wine is that this is the 21 vintage, and the 21 vintage was generally a colder and challenging year. They also lost around 60 to 70% of their fruit due to frost as well. So this was a challenging vintage in 21, straight after COVID. And you find that kind of wetter character, which they had in September, in that kind of leafy tomato stalk we mentioned in this wine. So it definitely has that that green edge to it.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to jump now to wine 5, which we had already talked about. And here is a very quick poll. And Jerry, this is for you. We did have Gamay in here, but it just felt a little hard. It felt a little rough to give it on wine 4, but we did give it here on wine 5. So you guys can go ahead and pick Pinot, because wine 5 is a Pinot. But the question is, where do you think that it's a different region? Where do you think the second Pinot is from? And I guess, folks are coming in with the majority landing, I'm pretty sure, in one place here. It'd be interesting for you guys to voice out why you're picking this region in the chat, if you don't mind. And I'll just give folks like 5 more seconds and go on to the reveal as we travel. So, percentage-wise, Jimmy, and the results, we have 70% of folks in California and 26% of folks in New Zealand. So that's a big number for New Zealand too. And 4% are in France. Would Jimmy have picked two from France? I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah. So obviously the video is going down to ABC in Santa Maria. So yeah, I mean, look, your options there really are from Cali or from New Zealand, and I like a lot of the comments that people are making there. So well done. Yeah, you've got to think about this wine. I think this is a really fascinating wine because I think it has a ton of elegance. I think it's got a lot of I think it's got a lot of beauty to it. Actually, it's a really great wine. And I like the fact that some of you put New Zealand because this could, I mean, if we had probably put South Africa as an option, this could have been from the Hemelanada because it has a savory element, which is very classic of that area. New Zealand often has a lot of brightness in it. This is a bit more savory, this wine, but often you find a lot of brightness in a Serasan or, something from Marlborough down to even somewhere like Martinborough as well. Yeah, and that's another good one. And Oregon would be quite interesting because they are probably closer to Burgundy. But I do think this is really quite an interesting one. It's kind of an old school style. Now, this is ABC, so Au Bon Climat, which was established by Jim Clellandon, who is called the Prince of Pinot. He was before he passed away. One of the most important characters in the creation of kind of Burgundian expressions of wine from California, really putting Santa Maria specifically on the map, but helping Santa Barbara and Californian wine as a whole. The flame has been carried today by Jim Adelman. So it's gone from Jim Clellandon to Jim Adelman, and I do tastings with Jim Adelman a lot for West London Wine School, and it's just a lot of Jims. There's me, there's Adelman, and there's Clellandon. So this is called Le Bauge au-dessus, which means wild party upstairs, which I think is a phenomenal name for it. And it's from one of the most important vineyard sites in California, Bien Nacido, which is Santa Maria, which has a whole host of producers making exquisite wine from it. ABC are well known for crafting wine, so they do have a fair heavy hand on yeast, and a bit of wood as well. I know some of you have mentioned that in this as well. But 20 months in French oak, about 30% new on this. There's Jim, and Jim will be very delighted that you've picked a younger picture of him as well, Limang. Jim's a good friend, actually. He's a Spurs, as in a Tottenham Hotspur. Sorry, I know you have other Spurs down in Texas. But he's a Spurs Tottenham Hotspur fan as well. So that's actually why he does a tasting for me every year for free, because I'm a Spurs fan, which is quite cool. Their wines are absolutely brilliant. And of course, what you will do, I think, is you start with ABC if you're getting into Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And then you branch out to some of the smaller producers, maybe more reductive expressions. And by reductive, I mean, on Gross Lees, much more minery Chardonnays. They make really importantly balanced Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I think this is cracking. I said to Lemeng yesterday when I was tasting this wine that it's 187 ml, but I lied a little bit earlier when I said I haven't drunk since coming back to South Africa. I had a bit of this last night. I only saved a little bit for the tasting tonight. Sorry, Limang, because I think this is really showing very, very nice. And I think this is outstanding. I think it's a really great Pinot, a much more solid vintage. This is 2020, so it's a bit older, but a really great wine. Really good.
I want to just pull some parallels, and I know I keep edging you on with timing, and yet I'm holding you back. Two questions for you to think about, and one comment. Jillian asked about the Central Otago, so definitely make a comment about why it's not New Zealand Pinot.
Yep. Yep.
But Jimmy, one thought that we had when we were tasting on the bottling line, Lindsay and I were talking about it after. This wine had some savory, that umami thing that you were talking about. And
Yep.
so I feel and empathize with the folks, the 4% who voted for France, because I
Yeah.
felt like there were some European elements to this wine. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think so. The two things. Let me tackle your last one first. The savory is an interesting group, right? It's a very broad group. So you could talk about savory in all types of things, being sort of more vegetal savory, like I mentioned earlier, more savory, more umami, like soya sauce savory, and so on. I think I find in a lot of Pinot Noir that comes from Burgundy, it's a much more kind of more fungal sort of characteristic. So maybe truffle and less truffles, but more mushroom and towards vegetal in that kind of area. Whereas the density that comes through a Pinot with this, like this one, for example, is that it's going into that sort of almost sort of soya characteristic, which I love. And it's that kind of slightly darker mushroom note to it, maybe black truffle, right? Which I think is different. So I think that's where I would go from it. I know you guys, especially out on the West Coast, will taste so many Pinots, and you probably don't find them as savory. But I do. I mean, it's really complex. It comes down to clone as well. There are certain clones that will develop savory notes more quicker. And the UC Davis has done a huge amount of research into this, as has the AWRI in Australia, the Australian Wine Research Institute. And you find that there are certain clones that will oxidize and go savory more. Soil is a massive point. Iron-based soils with Pinot Noir, lots more savory characteristics in it as well. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one, but it's more complex than black and white. Your first thing was around Central Otago, mentioned by Gillian. Central Otago is a really fascinating neck of the woods. It has a very thin ozone layer. There's a lot of direct sunlight. UV light is huge on Central Otago, and there's naturally higher alcohols. So you'll often find there being a bit more spice that lifts off the alcohol, and a bit more concentration, less savory. And of course, if you've tried a Felton Road, one of the greats, of course, they go savory with age. But a lot of the, be it Ripon or whatever it may be, from Lake Wanaka or down, you'll find that Central Otago tends to have a more core of brightness, and maybe a little bit like this, but then more spice. Much more spice comes lifted off with that kind of alcohol.
Okay, so we're going to go on to wine 6, and in the meantime, I want
I
folks
love
to
how
say,
you cut me off right there.
sorry.
Come on, Jimmy, hurry up.
We're going to go to wine 6 right now as you take a last sip. And folks, I'd love to hear from you if you enjoyed having the same variety, two regions side by side. Sometimes we worry that we took away a spot that you could have tasted something else. So definitely would love to get your opinion. All right, wine 6.
Yeah, and Gillian's mentioned savory on Santa as well, and I agree. It's something that I'm investigating a lot more. Hence, I'm going to be in Santa Barbara from the 15th of December to the 20th of December, because I agree with you. It's making some great wines. Number 6. So this is the what we would call the outlier. It doesn't have a friend tonight, but maybe you can be that friend for number 6. And we always like the kind of the introvert, don't we? We've got to put the arm around them. So number 6 has the same common theme, that we're going to be getting some sort of minerality. So on the last 2 wines, by the way, the Pinot, you've got minerality coming from limestone soils of Chassagne-Montrachet, fairly heavy limestone. And then you've got, of course, the Pacific effect on Santa Maria, which is, of course, one of the coldest parts, in fact, of that whole of California. All right, so yeah, number 6, carrying on that theme. So we are looking at another wine that doesn't have much density of color. So it's kind of quite pale, and you're in that kind of pale garnet sort of characteristic again in this one. But I wanted to pick something that really showcases minerality in a much different way. And this wine certainly does it for sure. Oh yeah, we've got some great comments coming in about doing that comparison of Pinot was quite fun. So Limeng, there's loads of good feedback
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, wine. I'm so excited about this wine actually.
So pale garnet for sure. Now, this is fascinating. It doesn't have a huge amount of density, but there's a bit of sweetness there, but it's really aromatic. And it's got a lot of, I think this rides the aromatic with a lot of complexity, right? There's a lot of things to talk about here. And you can see the right-hand side of your screen. This is when I use a wine like this in an examination, I find students should really nail this, because you've only got to pick something about what I get, right? And I normally am getting about 40 or 50 things in this wine, so it's quite intense. Developing, but beautiful nose here, because you've got something floral, but is that dried? You know, is it like dried rose, for example? But notice how the fruit here, the last two Pinots were red cherry based, maybe the second one a bit more plummy. There's a bit of that here, but it's got red currant and cranberry, but I actually think they're more dried. You know, there's dried cherries, there's dry cranberry characteristic to it. And that's what I've highlighted at the tertiary at the bottom there. So I think the fruit here has matured. And the Pinots you got, the fruit hadn't matured. The fruit was still primary. This has certainly matured, which would normally tell us older or more regime in terms of oak mandated aging, something like that. I find there's a bit of herbs, Italian seasoning in here. There's hugely sort of graphitey, pencily, whetstone note. But then there's nothing sweet about the oak. The oak is resinous, piney, cedary, bit smoky, bit ashy, and then tons of that lovely tertiary. So that kind of dried fruit, like I mentioned, lots of those forest floor. It's very autumnal. This is very much this time of year. I'm not sure wherever you are in the States, what kind of season you're going through. I know the States is huge. Britain, we are sadly firmly going already into autumn. I mean, sadly, I mean, I love autumn, but my harvest for my vineyard is normally at about middle of October. We're picking on the 29th of September. We're early. I'm just getting stressed about it. So that's why I'm saying that out loud. Tea leaves. Yes. Fantastic. That's really good. Yeah, for sure. There's this kind of, this kind of tea leafy character. That's going to translate into the structure that you get through very, very soon. But I love that. Well done, Sharon. Lemon back that up as well. God, it's tasty. Good. Let's give it a go. And notice here that you've got so much to deal with on your palate. It's very dry. There's tons of acid, almost enamel stripping. And then you've got tons of tannin. I mean, it is gum drying, kind of like sucking on a tea bag, those tea leaves coming through again. But the alcohol's fairly high. And with that comes a bit of body. But I put medium plus to full because I think there's a little bit of elegance there, which I really like. It's not just like a big chunky Cabernet Sauvignon or whatever. It has that bit of elegance that comes through. Great flavor intensity. The finish is really good. I didn't put long here, and that's why it's not outstanding. Why? Because the tannin is still quite young and strong, and it kind of dictates the finish. So it's not fruit on the finish yet. It's really good, and you can make it sexy immediately by having it with the right food. But I think I just think the tannin is a bit dry on the finish. Has great potential for aging. Delicious style. I know it's already half past, so Limeng.
We'll keep talking about it after. So for those of you, this is your last poll of the day. Again, is anonymous. I know after going to two where we kind of gave the variety away at some point, it's hard to get back to the unknown. Could be any of these varieties. And if you got other, let us know. I'm going to end the poll in about 5 seconds because we're running out of time. And I want to leave time for questions here. All right. So actually, we have a pretty good start. You guys started at 67%, and now we're up to 76%. So I think that's good enough. We have 74% of people on Nebbiolo. And we have 17% of people on Sangiovese, which really leads in the Italian train of 87% of folks in Italy. We do some folks on Zinfandel. So where do you want to go with this, Jimmy?
Well, it's past my bedtime, so I need to go now. So I'll leave it open. I'm joking. Yeah, you've got those three examples. You have a Primitivo, so from the south, right? Zinfandel, as you know, it's going to be darker. It's going to be more dried fruit. It's going to be something that tends to have much more sort of density in the middle of its palate. It's very classic, but typically very dried fruits. The real sort of mean one here is we've gone Sangiovese and Nebbiolo. So both those varieties, both of them have high tannins and high acids. You can't shy away from that. But Nebbiolo's is always much more grippier, much more drying, whereas Sangiovese's are often a little bit more polished, a little bit more sweeter. And clearly you're finding a difference of the tannic structure there. Which is quite common. They're both quite red fruited. Sangiovese tends to be red fruit, which is a bit more kind of like that Kirschy Chambord, that kind of lovely concentrated red fruit, whereas Nebbiolo tends to be more rustic, tends to be more dry cranberries and all those kind of notes like we mentioned. So you'll notice that coming through. It's clearly Italian, as you know. And something I didn't mention is often what you find as a difference between these two is Nebbiolo has this kind of almost like botanical citric peel character, whereas Sangiovese doesn't tend to have that so much. But it's a massive debatable point because we often I go to Italy a lot. I'm in Tuscany a lot, and Piemonte actually. I'm there 4 or 5 times a year, and whenever you want to get really an argument going, it's like Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, what's better? And it's like a big it's a big talking point. Yeah. And I'm sure some have some really strong opinions about that as well. And I'm not going to tell you mine, but you probably might be able to guess I don't know if you'll guess my favorite, but it's my next trip to Italy, and so you'll have to watch my social media feed for that.
So we're definitely going to Italy here, back to Europe. I love the ping pong today. And here's where we're at.
Yeah, so a link to the first wine in 2 ways. A link to the first wine because it's in Piemonte, and our first wine was the Gavi di Gavi, or Gavi di Comune di Gavi. Another link is the fact that this is Giuseppe Cortesi. So the winemaker, or the family of this, rather, is named after the grape of the first white wine, which I think is quite cool, but not a grape that they work with, ironically. So this is 2021 Barbaresco. Barbaresco is that smaller village which is situated just up the Tonaro River, or rather I should say down the Tonaro River from Alba. So that's just to the east, and Barolo is much more behind that. And these guys are famous for, this vineyard, from the Rabaja vineyard, which the Produttori di Barbaresco are very famous for as well, which is a wonderful enclave that makes very concentrated expressions of wine. So, I'm a sucker for Barbaresco. It's often been in the shadow of Barolo. I mentioned earlier that Nebbiolo is the king of grapes, the grape of kings. Barolo is really the king of all of this region. However, I'm always a sucker for the underdog. I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan, so that's always the case. This is Piercarlo Cortesi, the current winemaker. But it's a really great wine that has great structure to it. It's inherently Piemontese. It's going to be great. The season's coming. You've got to come to Italy, by the way, in the next 2 months. It's white truffle season.
Right.
This with a pasta with some white truffle would be phenomenal.
And so I think we'll leave you to draw the conclusions, those of you tasting, between wine number 1 and wine number 6. But we thought it was really cool. I thought it was cool when Jimmy picked these wines to have a white and a red from the same region. Jimmy, tell us a little bit more about Wines with Jimmy, because holy crap, I don't know if you saw earlier, folks on the chat were talking about how you've helped them with their studies, and I can tell you that you've helped me with mine. So tell us more.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's thank you for giving me the stage and the slide to do this, Limang. It's very lovely. Wine with Jimmy is 5-year-old now. It's very young, but it's a global success. Just come back from South Africa, where I held a bar takeover in Cape Town. I can't remember if I mentioned this to you, Lemang, or to the group, so I'll say it again. But we had 70 people at that event who came to just say hi and have a glass of wine with me, which I just found really crazy. But it's great. Yeah, we've got great markets. The US, you guys are such a solid market for me. You're about 40% of my global market, and we have, as I mentioned earlier, nearly 12,000 people actively learning with Wine with Jimmy at the minute. So they're paid to learn with Wine with Jimmy from around the world in markets all over, and helping people with their WSET professional studies. But if you're not doing WSET and you want to learn just yourself, you'll find them exceptionally structured and useful. And even if you're doing things like CMS, you'll find them useful as well. We have a lot of students doing that too. So they're all video filmed content. So it seems like I'm your tutor, but it's recorded, of course. And there's lots of additional benefits, exclusive content, ad-free, those kind of things. So yeah.
And I just want to say, I saw Charlene's comment and I wanted to say it too. I told Jimmy that I actually went back to take WSET because all of a sudden I found myself in business with WSET and not understanding WSET enough. So after almost 30 years in the business, I started taking certification myself. And I wouldn't have passed with distinction without Jimmy. But very importantly, he doesn't just help you pass. And that's one of the claims that you make on your site, which I thought was great. It's like, I'm not trying to pass, I'm trying to learn. So I just want to say heartfelt thank you. And I can also say that you guys who are studying for a diploma, because now I'm going through the process myself, I basically have a cellar worth of wine to play with, and you can expect to see a lot more content going down that way as well. If you're not studying, again, not a problem, because you see that we're here about the stories, we're here about the tasting.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, just very quickly so that I can turn on videos for everybody else, let's talk about your English winery.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're coming into our fourth vintage in about 2 weeks. As it says there, authentically English, low intervention. So what that jargon means is that I want to make wine that tastes of England. England is part of Great Britain. It's made by the sea and constantly shaped by the sea. So I want the taste of sea in my wine. A reason why I've done this tasting, Lemang, is really to sort of talk about that quite a bit in terms of minerality, etc. We don't add sugar, we don't add yeast. We want to make wines that are authentically English, so low alcohol, 10%, 11% alcohol. And we are seeking representation in the US. It's important for me to be in the US because I do spend 2 or 3 months of the year there. We're in Canada, we're coming into South Africa as well. So the US is a natural fit, and there's a route to market. There's a lot of people who are in the US, like you guys, who would probably like to drink some of my wines. So
absolutely. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out with Jimmy how we can bring some at least to MTW. Two quick things. One is if you've never experienced harvest before, especially those of you who are not in the industry and you want to get a sense of harvest, our friends over at Samsara are actually going to peel back the onion and let you into their cellar on October 2nd. So the winemaker there likes to play with, for instance, whole cluster, partial cluster, ferments, and he's going to actually show you his tanks and all that good stuff. So if you're interested, for subscribers as well as those who attend this webinar, where I think it's 15% off. So if you QR code this or use this code, 6 wines from Samsara. Their wines are pretty outrageously expensive. The 6 wines, if you bought 750s, are about 450. But of course, we're selling it at, I think it works out to be 100 plus. It's 120 with the 15 off if you're getting it. And like I said, there is a webinar and you get to meet the winemaker. And then, of course, I hope you guys will come back for Cause and Effect. Tim Gazer is back with the next session on October 24th. If you haven't had Assessing Structure with Tim Gazer, which was volume 1, it is still available on our site. You can go to our website, mtwwines.com, and get it. You can get the webinar. If you are a subscriber, don't worry. Please don't buy another one because I don't have enough for everybody. Your monthly subscription gets you your Tim Gazer Cause and Effect. And if you want to subscribe, now is a good time. You save about 10% off by subscribing instead of buying solo webinars. And Tim is going to do Cause and Effect, and then he's going to do volume 3 on whites, white conclusions and red conclusions. And we're having Tim come every 3 months. And Jimmy, you'll be back in 3 months too.
Sure. Yeah, Lemang, thank you so much. Honestly, you put your tireless effort in putting this together. It's just fantastic. And you get such great speakers, except me, but you get such great speakers coming in. And I mean, it's such a great system, great quality wines, just so efficient. And I love being a part of this. So thank you very much for your dedication to the cause.
Of course. And last but not least, if you want all of Jimmy's notes from today, this is the QR code. It's the same QR code every single time.